it involves a number of banks, and this is quite important to know, is that when you do a payment, a cross-border payment across the cross-border payment and the correspondent banking scheme, it is not just one or two banks involved, it might involve a number of banks. Over the years, we have seen that this has caused some frictions in the industry, and mainly around transparency and speed, and not so much the speed, but the transparency of the speed and the transparency of the fees, etc. The system is based on messaging, and that means that if one bank fires off a message to another bank, he knows about that one, but the next message, he has very little visibility. So that's a bit the core problem that we faced with correspondent banking, is a lack of transparency. And this is exactly where GPI comes in. What we have done is we have transformed this messaging system into a transaction system. Technically, very simple, by making sure that all the messages that are about the same payment carry the same unique identifier. And then all of a sudden, we go from an individual messaging system into a transaction system that allows to track payments, because we know exactly where the payment sits. There is an observer and a directory. The observer is a mechanism that allows us to see if banks behave according to the rules they have lined out. So GPI is about introducing the UETR, as we call it, that unique transaction identifier, and a set of rules to which the bank has to apply. It mainly is, for instance, about same-day processing of payments. Banks are obliged to process the payments same day, but of course they can disclose their cut-off times in the directory. So this allows us to track the payments and to see if banks behave according to the rules. And this adds the transparency that is so much wanted. On top of that, we're also able to confirm the payment, because once the payment is done, this tracker allows us to really see that the payment has been done. The bank who initiated the ultimate payment will tell the tracker, we have confirmation that the payment has been done and the account has been credited. So we are running this project now since, I think, 2016, 2017, and we've seen quite major take-up. There are 120 banks live. 50% of all the Swift cross-border payments are today on GPI. So just to show that we are really creating a critical mass here. And just a number that I think speaks for itself when you come to how relevant GPI is when it comes to cross-border payments. And contrary to popular belief, the correspondent banking system seems much faster than we would self-anticipate. 40% of all the transactions are handled within 5 minutes. 95% are handled within 24 hours. So just to say that this shows that this system is quite fast and very reliable as such. Now, one has to realize that the correspondent banking system, as Swift operates, is quite a closed system that involves the majority of banks worldwide and 2,000 corporates. What we see today, when we look a bit outside that ecosystem, is that there are a number of B2B ecosystems that are flourishing, on which trade happens in all sorts of forms. And they all need, at some point, to do settlement. And this seems like an eternal recurring problem to a lot of these B2B systems, to how to do the payment on these things. One obvious quote could be, of course, cryptocurrencies, but we see very little appetite at this moment to do settlement in cryptocurrencies. If banks would have to individually join each of these big B2B ecosystems, global banking adoption would probably be hard. And very importantly, what all these B2B systems ask is to have an easy way to do settlement and to have the confirmation that that payment has actually happened. And this is exactly where GPI has its strong point. It has the reach of all the banks connected to the Swift network, and it allows to do payment confirmation. This is why we do this proof of concept together with R3, whereby we will build a GPI Link, which, and the name says it well, it will link those B2B ecosystems, whatever they are, with the GPI network on Swift. How would that work? A brief overview. So we have a B2B ecosystem that, for instance, runs on a DLT platform, and company A and B have to have a payment done. They do a trade transaction, and they want to have it paid. What happens then is that via the DLT platform, an API call will be executed towards what we now call GPI Link. And this one will transform that API call. By the way, that API call can already contain that unique transaction number that will be used across the whole payment scheme. It will transform this API call into a payment initiation message that is sent to the bank. For banks, this is quite business as usual. It's important to mention this here. This is business as usual to receive this kind of payment instructions from their corporate. And as of then, the normal GPI payment transaction happens with the necessary tracking, as I just mentioned before. Once the payment is done, the bank will mention this via a credit confirmation message, again mentioning that UETR to the GPI Link, who can expose that information in the form of an API call to the DLT platform or whatever it is. So this is a little bit how it technically would work. What does it mean for banks? That is that they would, for them it would be business as usual, because they would receive payment instructions just like they've done before. Company A and Company B in this picture would do trade on a platform, and they do not need to know about the complexities behind GPI. So this is a bit in a nutshell how it works.